Okay, so one of the first things you might want to do is to normalize the data, because everything we saw in that previous chart has a very different scale. If you normalize things, that makes it easier to compare them. Now, normalization has quite a number of different meanings in different contexts, but here in this lecture, what I'm talking about is taking the values and scaling them so that they lie between 0 and 1. Okay, so we can just express them as a fraction of 1. And that's very easy to achieve in pandas. You just take the summary data and divide it by the maximum value of the summary data. So that takes every column and divides it by the maximum value in that column. And I've put this in another data frame. You could just normalize it in place. So you just set this to be the summary data is equal to the summary data divided by summary data.max. That would just give you a normalized data frame called summary data. But here I've created a new data frame called normalized data, which is the summary data normalized. Okay, that's what I just said. We could do this in place, but here I've got a new data frame. So once you've done that, you can start to do things like a comparative bar chart. So I could put all those different visualizations that we saw in the last thing where we did the subplots. I can put them all into one bar chart called a comparative bar chart, and we give each attribute a different color. Now, the problem with doing that is that we're going to end up with, if you think about it, we've got, what I would be doing therefore is taking those 5 charts, maybe, so here's the price, here's the profit, here's the sales, here's the marketing, here's the cost. I could give each of those a different color, red, red, green, orange, blue, and so on, and put them all into one chart. But then I'm going to end up with 5 lots of data, and each data has got 25 variables, so I will end up with 125 columns, 125 bars. So that's really too many. Instead, I'm just going to look at the high volume ones. So I'll segment the data first, pick the high volume ones, the A, F, and L columns. Sorry, they're not columns, are they? They're rows in this data set, in this data frame, because we're looking at products. And then I'll normalize them. I'll visualize the normalized data. Using this bit of code, it's a little bit involved. Okay, so it's creating a bunch of bars that have to be offset a little for each different attribute. So I'm not going to consider that code in detail because we're not going to use it again. So that's the code for doing a normalized, a comparative bar chart. The data has to be normalized to do this, because otherwise you end up with ridiculous. If you don't normalize the data, if you compare the sales, which go up to 175,000, with the profit, say, that goes up to 25, the profit would just be squashed down to, you wouldn't be able to see it on the chart. So everything has to be normalized to make this work. And when you do that, that's the picture you get. Okay, so you can see that in this case, each product has a different color. So product A is all the blue ones, product F is all the green ones, product L is all the, I'm just looking at the legend here, product L is all the red ones. And it helps a little bit in understanding the data. So you can see that, for example, it instantly stands out. There's no red column here. That means that nothing is spent on marketing product L. We did observe that earlier on. Which might be why, when you look at the sales, you can see that the sales of A and F are much higher than those of L. Maybe it's just because we spend more, or the company rather spends more on marketing. There's the marketing. The company spends more on marketing A and F, spend nothing on marketing L, and maybe that's why the sales of L are poorer. That might be a conclusion you could draw from that. Or it might be because L is more expensive. Now, we haven't seen this data before, but there we've seen the price. The price of A and F are very similar, and the sales of A and F are very similar. The price of L is much more expensive, and maybe that's why it sells fewer. or maybe it's just less popular. We don't really know, but you could start to draw out conclusions like this. Okay, but yeah, maybe it's nothing to do with any of these things. We don't really know. So what we're going to do next is use radar spider plots to explore this a bit further. Okay, so I'm going to finish that video there, and we'll start looking at radar or spider plots in the next one.